Good morning. Hi, I'm Jim Crawford. Welcome to the James E. Crawford Jr. and Associates Law Firm. Today I want to talk to you very briefly about federal courts in Maryland and how they differ from state courts. Not a lot of people think they will ever find themselves in a situation where the federal government is involved in prosecuting or involved in their life in somehow as far as a criminal or some other administrative matter, but it does happen. And it happens more frequently than you believe or would realize. In Maryland, there are basically two federal district courts, one in Baltimore on Pratt Street and another one in Greenbelt. There are quite a few ancillary auxiliary courts that the federal courts use that is kind of unusual because they're really makeshift courtrooms and they're held all over the state, believe it or not. For example, there's one in Ocean City, one in Aberdeen. Sometimes the Naval Academy is actually used to handle federal court matters. These things happen with the auxiliary offices when you're stopped on a federal highway or you're on a federal base, or even if it happens in a federal building or a federal parking lot. For example, Social Security Administration over Security Boulevard. If a alleged crime occurs or traffic offense occurs, it would be a federal offense and it would be adjudicated at one of the auxiliary federal courts or on Pratt Street in Baltimore. The real issue here, as far as the difference between federal courts and state courts, is that if you're talking about a real crime, in other words, if you're being charged with theft or a sex offense or robbery or something along those lines, and you're being charged in federal court, you have to be extremely careful because the penalties in the federal court system are much different and much more harsh. There is no parole, so to speak, in federal court. There is no, quote, good time in federal court. There are other ways of possibly getting your sentence reduced. What the court system in the federal courts is based upon a point system. And that point system is cumulative. In other words, the higher the points, the more time you get. Up until several years ago, those guidelines that were created by Congress were fixed. In other words, there's nothing you could do about it. Judges had a mandatory situation where you had to give the time. You got X amount of points, and therefore you did X amount of time. Now, since a case called Booker that happened several years ago, the Supreme Court laid down and said, listen, you're taking the discretion away from judges, which is not right. So those guidelines are now advisory, but judges still follow them, and they deviate once in a while depending upon what's happening. There's a lot of possible deviations. There's a lot of possible things that could happen. There's a lot of possible ramifications depending upon what you do in a federal system or a federal court system. The situation with a federal case is that if you're charged, Congress has set up a methodology that they make you make a choice almost immediately because they're trying to save resources as far as the federal agencies. If you're charged, they want you to make a decision pretty quickly as to whether or not you're going to try the case or you're going to cooperate or not cooperate. If you cooperate, obviously, you get points off. I'm simplifying it, but that's kind of the way it works. If you try the case, you don't get those points. Of course, if you win, you try the case, then all is good. So the point is that in a federal situation, it's much different than state court. There is no bail, so to speak, in a federal situation. You have a federal release scenario where you have a detention hearing and you're either released, either on home detention or just released, or you're not. So the consequences are high. If you find yourself in a situation where you're being charged federally, either with a citation or a regular criminal case, call me immediately or call a lawyer that knows what they're doing in the federal court system. There's not a lot of lawyers out there that do federal work as well as state work. And that's important because you need to understand how the two intermingle. So I hope this helped a little bit, and have a good day. Thank you.